Hey, what's up everybody, welcome back to another tutorial. So in this video we will be creating weather application using Vue.js. You will learn about Axios, how to fetch APIs and much more. So before going to the actual code, I just want to give you a short demo how this application works. So if I type city name Rio and click on search, you can see we are fetching the data from the API and we are displaying that here. You can see we have a 4 days forecast and all the data is dynamic, which is coming from the API. We can also change the location, so if I click on change location button, you can see everything is reset. Now I have to put another city name here, so I'm gonna type Tokyo and click on search, and you can see we have fetching all the data about Tokyo. We have 21 centigrade and for 4 days we have all the data available. Now I'm gonna change the city name to Berlin, and when I click search, you can see we get the Berlin's data, and we also have 4 days forecast. Alright, so before wasting more time, let's jump into the project. Alright, I have already created empty folder dev. Now we have to open that, and I'm gonna open cmd. Instead of cmd, I'm using git bash, and let's change the directory. Now we are inside dev directory. Let's create Vue application. But before creating Vue application, make sure you have installed Node, and you can see I have already installed in my computer. So now let's create a Vue application. For that we have to write Vue create weather app, which will be a project name. Now I'm gonna select Vue version 3, and let's just wait for this. When it is installed, we will be right back. Alright, so our application has been created. Now let's change the directory to the project folder, and let's open this in VS Code. Alright, so we have opened our project in VS Code. You can see we have all the required files here. Now let me just open the git bash inside VS Code using control and tilde button, and it will open the git bash inside VS Code. Now we have to run our project. So with the npm serve, it will run the local server. So let's just wait for this. Alright, our project is running. Let's click on this link and it will open our project on a browser. So we have a default boilerplate, which we will be get rid of this. So let's get back to VS Code, and let me minimize this. Let's go to the source directory, and here we have all the required files. main.js, which is connected with the public file, index.html, and we have the components. We have the app.vue, and the components is connected with the app view, which is here. Alright, so let's remove this. I'm gonna select from here, and let's add here a title, testing. Now let's get back, and you can see everything is gone instead of testing. Now if we go to package.json, you can see we don't have a Bootstrap installed, so we have to install that. I'm gonna open new git bash, and let's type npm install Bootstrap, and it will install all the dependency for Bootstrap. Now let's add the Bootstrap view. So let's just wait. Alright, so we have a Bootstrap view and we have Bootstrap. Let me close the git bash, and now we have to connect the Bootstrap with the main.js. So let's go to main, and here I'm gonna type the bootstrap path. I have already created the path, so I'm gonna paste that here. And we have bootstrap Vue. Now let's save and check this out, and you can see the font family has been changed, so it's mean our bootstrap is connected and working fine. Now let's get back to app.view, and we have to get rid of the styling and HTML. So I'm gonna just remove everything from here, and let's remove the component as well. Let's remove from here and remove the style as well. So we have a empty component here. Now if you check this in a browser, you can see we get the error because in the child element there will be something. So let's build up the search section here. I'm gonna need div. Inside that div we need header, and I'm gonna add some classes here, which is a bootstrap classes, and we need some padding. Alright, inside that I'm gonna use h1, which will be our heading. Let's give it some class, margin bottom 5, and now we need a title, whether app. Let's check this out. You can see we have the title. Now let's create the other sections. We need div flex, and it will be justify content center. So we need that search input field in the center. Now inside that we need another div, and that will be search bar, and width will be 50, margin x-axis 2. Now here we need input. Let's give it some classes here. Input form. Alright, so let's add a placeholder, and that will be enter a city. Now you can see we have the input field in the center. Now let's create the button. So I'm gonna create a button down here, and let's give it a class btn search button and button primary. So let's save this, and that will be search, and let's give it a icon. So I'm gonna use fab icon, FAS, and FA search. You can see we have a button, we have the input field, but we don't see the icon. So let's add that. Let's go to the index, and I'm gonna paste the URL here. Actually that is a CDN which I have copied from the Font Awesome website. You can see we are using Font Awesome 6.4. Let's check again, and we have the icon. So for the HTML part we are done. Now we have to add CSS. So let's add a body. Inside body we need background color, and that will be 121212, which is a black background. And if we check, you can see we have a black background. Now we need header. Inside header we need background, and that will be 2127 and 30, and we need border radius 20 pixel. Let's add a color white. Align center. Let's give it a font family. Yep, that will be okay. And we need margin top 5 rem. And you can see we have created our search container. So let's add the CSS for the search button, because we don't see the coloring of the search button. So let's add that. Background image, linear gradient to the right. Let me remove this, and the first color will be cyan and the second one magenta. Alright, and we have a beautiful search button. So for the CSS part and HTML part we are done. Now we have to add a functionality. So we have to pass the value from the input, and that will be city. And now after that we need data function. So I'm gonna create a data function here. Inside that function we need to return, and inside return we need to pass the city, and that will be empty. Let's create another show weather, and let's make this false. So we are getting the value from the input, and we will be passing that to city empty variable. And now let's create the show weather function, but first we need a method, and inside method object we need to create async and the function name search weather. Now inside that we need this show weather, and it will be equals to false. Then we need await this dot next tick. After that we have to make show weather true, so we can see the component when we click on search button. Alright, so we got a problem, and the problem is, oh actually I misspelled that, so that is fine now. And let me just check. If I type something here and click search, you can see request is not generated. So we have to complete our component HTML first, then we will pass the request. So let's create the component. I'm gonna delete the default component, and let's create another, and that will be weather.view. Now inside that I'm gonna copy all the code from the app.view and paste here. We need to remove everything from here. Now we have to assign that weather component in the app.view. So we have assigned that. Now we have to import the component name from components directory, and we need component name. Alright, so now we have to use this component here. Save it. We still got a problem. Let's check this out. Save this, and let's see where we got the issue. Let me check on a browser. So the component should be always be multi-word. Let's go to the, oh, so we didn't define the name of the component, so I'm gonna define my weather, and let me remove this. Now save it, and let me remove everything from here, and let's add a testing heading. So weather app will be here. Now let's check again, and you can see we got the component. So our component is connected with app.view, and let me remove this. So now we have to start building our cart for the today's weather. So let's create that. We need div container, and we need padding 0. Inside that we need a flex, and then we need a card which will be a main card, and its width will be 100. Inside that we need a div with padding of 3, and here we will add our heading with the class of margin bottom 1, and it will be our day. So let's add a Tuesday. So we got a card and we have a heading. Now let's add the remaining elements here. We need a text light, and that will be for date. So let me add a date. We are adding just a placeholder for now, so when we fetch a data from the API we will add those variable here, and it will make that dynamic. Now after the time we need another heading, and that will be a place. So let's give it a placeholder with the icon of FA location, which is a font or sub icon. So let's add a review. We also need a small tag for a country, and here I'm gonna put country. Now let's check, and we got all the elements. After that we need another div, and that will be temp. Here we will show our temperature, and that will be heading 1 with the weather temp class. And we need text light for description. After that we need another div, and that will be for card 2. So this one will be our second card. Inside that we need a table, and let's create a table items. Now let's create the div for the change location button. So I'm gonna create a div flex, inside that we need a form, and we need input. Now we have a change location button, we have a C levels table, and so the HTML part is done. The next thing we have to add the CSS. So I'm gonna fast forward this section to make the video shorter. So we have added the CSS for the main card. So let me just remove this, and let's go to the top. Here I'm gonna connect the component. So let's create the component for days. I'm gonna create new component, and that will be days weather dot view. Now I'm gonna copy the code from the app.view and I will paste that here. Let's remove this. Let's make this empty template. Alright, so let me remove this as well. So we have an empty template for the desk component. Now we have to add the component here. So I'm gonna import days weather from the components directory, and it's a days weather. Now we have to use that in the component section, and we got the error. So alright, so we have to define that component up here. Now we are good to go. Let's add the HTML for the 4 cards. So I'm gonna need div, dash tab, and text will be center. We also need a loading section, so when we click on search, it will fetch the data, and in the meantime it will show us the loading. Now after that we need a UL. Inside that we need li. Here we need to create a 4 cards, so let's make that real quick. We need a div with the padding y-axis 3. Now let me copy this 4 times and save it. So we have our cards, but it didn't show. Alright, so let's create the CSS for this section. We have a container. We have a 4 cards. So our CSS is complete, but it didn't show in the right way. So let's check for this problem. I'm not sure that I have made a mistake in the HTML, so let's see. Oh, we have to copy that from here, and let's paste that inside dflex so it can show the card side by side. Now save it, and you can see it is looking perfect. So our HTML part is pretty much done. Now let's test this out. I'm gonna type here Rio, and I'm gonna go to the inspect, and I have added the view extension. So let's see that we got anything from here. So let me refresh this, and if I type something here, you can see we got that here. We also have more components, but we will pass the data in a bit while. So let's go to the app.view, and here in the weather component I'm gonna pass the city, and the value will be city. And we also need if statement, so we can display when we click on search button, and this function will make this true. Now let's add that function here. So when we click on search button, it should call the search weather. And here I'm gonna pass the props. I'm gonna create a props, and inside that I'm gonna type city. That will be string. Now we need a data, and let's return. Alright, so let's check this. If we go to the inspect, now I'm gonna go to the view tools, and if I type something, you can see we got that here, and when I click search, you can see it is showing the second card, and we also got the city name here. So let's go back. Now I'm gonna create a function async. The function name will be created. Inside that function I'm gonna create a constant response and assign that to the await, and after that we need axios.get. Inside here I'm gonna pass the URL, which will be our API URL. And now I'm gonna show you how to fetch that API from the website. So this is the open weather website, and if I click API docs, you can see we have the URL we can copy from here. If we go down, we have the another, and we have all the required documentation here. So whenever you need anything about API, you can go here and search for that information. So let's copy the URL and let's go back to VS Code, and I'm gonna paste that here. Now we need to do some adjustment with this. I'm gonna remove the latitude and longitude, and here I'm gonna type a Q, which will be a city name, and here we will add the API key. So let's paste that, and let's change the city. I'm gonna type dollar and bracket. Inside that I'm gonna type this dot city. So we are passing the city name, city value here. We need to pass another parameter, and that will be unit. The value will be metric. Save it, and we still got the error. So let's console log that, so we can see if we got the response or not. Alright, axios is not defined. Oh, we didn't define the axios, so let's import that. And I think I haven't installed the axios, so I also have to install that. Let's open the new git bash, and if you see in a package.json, we don't see any axios dependency, so let's install axios. Wait a while for this. Alright, so our axios dependency is installed. Now if we go back, let me minimize this. If we go back to the weather.app, now we don't see any error and everything is working fine. If I type Rio or Tokyo and search, you can see we got the data, and we have the configuration, we have the all the required data here. If we go to the data, we see the city name, and we also see weather. It's a cloudy. Alright, so we have to fetch that data into the our components. So let's do that real quick. We have to return some variables. Let's create that real quick. Here I'm gonna define some props, like we need icon URL, we need date, we need time, and now we have to assign the API values to that props. So I'm gonna check that. Alright, let me assign the temperature, Now we need description. Now if we check, let me check here. If we check in a view tool, now we are getting all the values. Now let's add the remaining values. So for the icon URL, I'm gonna use the open weather URL and assign the icon name here. Let me remove the icon URL because it is too time. Now we have the URL. So now I'm gonna create an instance for that, and I'm gonna get the hours, and let's format that. After minutes we need to show seconds. Now if we check that, we get the time. We need date, so let me just make date. We need month's name, and we need year names. Alright, so we get the error. Now we have to define the months, so I'm gonna create array, and here I'm gonna define the months. Alright, so we have fetched all the data from the API and assigned that to the each variables. Now we have to fetch these variable into our HTML, so let's do that. Let's go to the top and let's make this in a bracket, time as well, and for this city name let's change the country. Now let's change the temperature. And let's make the description as well. And we also need the icon, so for that I'm gonna create the image tag here, and in the source attribute we will pass the URL, which is icon URL. Save this, and if I try to type a Berlin and submit, you can see we are fetching all the dynamic data. Now we have to fix the temperature. We have to remove the decimal point from here, so I'm gonna go to the API function. I'm gonna use a function here, math dot round, and I'm gonna pass the temperature to that function. Now save it, and you can see we have removed the decimal point from the temperature. Now I'm gonna remove this Tuesday and type that today because it is a current weather. Alright, so now it is looking fine. Now we have to fetch the data for the table rows, so let's create some variable for that. I'm gonna use a C level. we need wind and the country. So now if I put Rio and click on search and check for the component, so we have to fetch these variable values. So now let's assign that here. I'm gonna pass the weather data, wind, speed. We need sea level. And we need a country name. So alright, now let's check again, and if yep, we have the country, we have the wind speed, and we have all the data. So let's check this in a view, and yep, we are getting the values. Let's add here sea level, and here I'm gonna show the, let's add here humidity here. We will also fetch these variable because we didn't fetch the humidity. And let's add here wind. So let's fetch the humidity real quick. Let's add here humidity, save it, and now you can see we are fetching all the data accordingly. So let me just change the city name to Dubai, and you can see we are fetching Dubai temperature and everything is here. Let's change another one, New York, and yep, it is showing perfectly. So now we have to work on this card, so let's do that. Let's get back to VS Code. Now let's go to the daysweather.vue file, and here we are going to show all the data for the forecast. Let me remove the name, and here I'm gonna type props. Inside that I'm gonna type city name and assign that to the string. Now we have to pass the city name from the weather.vue, so let's pass that city name, and the value will be city name. Alright, so we are passing. Now we have to define that here, this dot city. So we are assigning the city name to this variable, and this city name is coming from app.vue, and we are passing that to days weather component. Now let me create data function, and inside that we need return. So save it, and let's check this out if we get the city name in the days component or not. So let's go to view, and you can see we are getting city name. If I change to Tokyo and click search, and the same Tokyo is here. Alright, so we will be using that city name for API URL. Now let's create mounted function, and inside that function we need to create this dot fetch weather data function. So now we have to create this function down here in the method section. Let's create async fetch weather data. Now let's get a console log so we can check if our component is working fine or not. So I'm gonna type here this dot city name, and let's give it a string working. Alright, now let's check this out. Let me remove this, and we got the error. So we need to check that fetch weather function is not a function. So we have a problem with this function. Actually the problem is with the props. We misspelled that here. It's a prop. Now let's check this again, save it and refresh. Now if I type something, you can see everything is working fine. Let's get back. Now we have to fetch the API, so let's do that. I'm gonna need a constant API key, and here I will assign my API key. We need another city, which will be our city name, and we need API URL. So here we will pass our URL. Now let me copy the API key and let me copy the URL as well. Let's go here and paste here. Now we need to change our URL a little bit. So let's change the weather to forecast and change the city to the constant city, and I think we are good. And let's add the API key. So we are fetching all the API key city name, and now we need to send this API URL to the Axios function. So let's create Axios function here, and inside that I'm gonna pass the API URL, and then we need a response. And inside that response I'm gonna console log that so we can see our data is coming or not. So let's paste the response here and save it, and let's check this out. Alright, so we didn't define the Axios, we have to import that. Let's save this and check again. If I type Rio, and we still got the error, so we need to check that. Let's check here. Alright, everything is fine here. Let's get back. See, oh, we did the spelling mistake. It's a forecast. Now let's check again. If I type something, let me just clear this, and if I type Rio, and you can see now we are getting data perfectly, and in a console log we also getting data. And if we go in the data, we have a list, so we have to do a logic for this list. So let's do that. I'm gonna go here, Up here, let's create a constant, and that will be forecast data. Let's assign the response dot data list. So now we have a list and a forecast variable. Let's create a logic for this. We need another constant, and it will be filter data. So we will be filtering our list, and we will fetch only for 4 days, so we can show that in our forecasts. Now we need to map that. Inside that, I'm gonna return, and I'm gonna use date, and here I'm gonna use movement just to format our date. So we need to import that. Let me import that here. And I think I didn't install the movement library, so we need to install that as well. Movement. Alright, let's install that. Let's create another git bash. npm install movement. Let's go to the package.json, and we have the movement dependencies. Now we can use the movement function. So let's go back, and here I'm gonna get the date. I'm gonna get from the item dt text, and let's splice that using space. Now let's get the temperature, and I'm gonna do the same math function here, math.round, and we need to pass the temperature, and we need description. Now inside weather, let's get the description. After that, icon URL, and we will assign the same URL. So I'm gonna copy from here, and let's paste here, and let's change the weather data into the item. Alright, so now we are good to go. After that, we need reduce, and inside reduce function we need to reduce the list item. So I'm gonna need arrow function. Inside that, we need if statement. So we will check for the same date, days.date is same. So if the date is same, we will show only one list according to that date. Now we need to push that item into the filtered variable. So now let's return that, and let's fetch only 4 items. So we need a slice starting from 1 to 5. Alright, so let's just console that, and let's add the catch function here. So if we got any error, it will show the error on a browser. Let's console the error function. Alright, let's see this in a browser. If we type like Rio, and you can see we are fetching only 4 items, and we have all the required data here. Now we have to show that in our cart, so let's do that. Let's go to the data, and here I'm gonna create some props. We need icon URL as well. Let's go to the template, and I'm gonna remove the dummy cards. Now we need to create if statement. So if loading is true, it will show the loading, and here we need else. Alright, here we need for loop. So day in forecast, and let's give it a key day dot date. So we have the loading, and now let's add the remaining item here. So I'm gonna copy the image from here and let paste here. Alright, in the day section we need day dot date, and let's fetch the temperature, and we need degree and capital C. Let's check. So we still got the loading. Let's see where is the issue. So let's see. Alright, so we didn't passing the filter data to the forecast variable, so let's do that. Forecast and assign the filter data, and let's add the loading false. Save it and let's check again, and you can see we got the 4 cards. Let me fix the icon URL. Alright, now we have to work on the weekly days, because for now it is showing the date as well. So we have to fetch only day name. So let's do that. I'm gonna create a function here, get day name, and now we have to create this function down here. Alright, let me minimize this so we can see where this function ends. Alright, here. So we need to create a function. Let's pass the date, and let's return date.format. Let's save this, and let's see this in a browser. Now we have a week days. Alright, so if I change the, let me just change the city name. Let me type here Berlin, and you can see now we are fetching all the data dynamically. And if I change Dubai, and it is also changed. Let's fix this real quick. So where it is, sea level. Alright, let's put here if statement. If sea level is greater than 0, then shows sea level, else it should show null. So here it is a null. Now let's change the city. Let's search, and you can see we are fetching the sea level as well. So let's work on the change location button. Alright, let's add the event. So when we click on this button, it should call the change location function. Let's create that function here. Let me create method. Inside method object, I'm gonna create change location function. Inside that, create reload. So when we click on the change location button, it will reload the page. Now we have to change the color of this button, so let's do that. Alright, let's copy the class name from here and go back and paste here. Save it and let's check again. Now we have a beautiful button. So we are done with this application. If you like, you can customize this furthermore, and if you like our video, please consider to subscribe our channel and press the bell icon so you won't miss any upcoming videos.